The past week has seen an avalanche of post-presidential debate polling showing Vice President Kamala Harris narrowly leading former President Trump. Harris appears to hold a lead nationally, but in the battleground races that will decide the election, the picture the polls are painting is muddled. Democratic senators told The Hill this week they are wary of the polls, pointing to past elections. Republican strategists also tell us they are not taking anything for granted. Here to go on the record and help us make sense of it all is Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science from Decision Desk HQ. Scott, it's great to see you. Just to kick this off, we're days away from the presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. It's obviously the first and only time they'll meet on the debate stage this cycle. So what do you expect that dynamic to be?
I expect it to be somewhat soundbitey, right? Like JD Vance, that's his thing over the last 6 months is he's always got a quip. Tim Walz has got that folksy persona and obviously quick off the hip as well. I think both are going to try and make an impression because, as you noted, this race is deadlocked, or at least the polls are showing it deadlocked. So they're going to try and make a difference. For their ticket. I also think it'll probably be one of the lower watched debates, certainly lower than the last presidential debate. So we'll see if it actually makes a dent in the overall race going forward.
Scott, it seems like Tim Walz and J.D. Vance have this Midwestern blue-collar brand, clearly trying to appeal to many of those voters, particularly in the blue wall, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. But ultimately, will this debate have any sort of an impact on the top of the ticket or in the polls nationally or in those swing states?
But what we'll have to, I'm always a wait and see. I want to see the data, but if you want my guess ahead of time, I don't think so. We've got 2 weeks of data of polling data post the Harris debate. And while, a lot of the media punditry said that she clearly won the debate, the polls tell a different story. It's a mixed bag. She's not nearly as far ahead in North Carolina and Georgia as she was pre-debate. She may have gained a point or two in the averages in places like Michigan and Wisconsin. But again, that's a point or two. It's not like she's running away with it. So the polls stayed pretty static after last debate, and I kind of expect that to be the same after this one.
So speaking of presidential debates, Vice President Kamala Harris has accepted CNN's invitation for an October presidential debate, but Trump says there will not be a third debate. This week I chatted with a number of Republicans, including Trump donors and former advisors to the president, who want to see him debate. Scott, do you think he will change his mind, or, is he going to stick with this?
I'm going to use the line Donald Trump says is let's see what happens. I think he has a tendency to make some definitive statements like that, like there will be no third debate, and then weeks later say circumstances changed and change his mind on that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he changed his mind. I also wouldn't be surprised if there is no third debate. I do think this, given the deadlock in the polls and the position that Donald Trump has put himself in, is, hey, I'm out here, I'm ready to debate anybody. I've got better ideas. I'm a killer debater, as he puts it. I think the pressure is going to mount for him to do it. And so I think it would make sense if he's looking for a breakout moment for his campaign, or maybe not even a breakout moment, a slight edge as we get into this very close race.
Well, we'll be watching to see what happens there. The only person who knows what's happening inside Donald Trump's head is Donald Trump. So we'll be watching him. So we have seen a ton of state and national level presidential polling this week, but North Carolina in particular has gotten a lot of attention in the wake of the scandal surrounding gubernatorial candidate and Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. Democrats obviously hoping this is going to sink the top of the ticket, but Trump still has a narrow lead according to the latest Decision Desk average and a number of recent polls that were released. So, Scott, is Robinson doing any damage to Trump at the top of the ticket?
That is a good question. I will say this, Julie, you and I have talked about a lot of scandals this cycle. George Santos, all that. This Mark Robinson thing, on one hand, it's crazy, but on the other hand, I don't know if it makes top 2, top 3 of we've heard from a campaign or congressional scandal. And I think that's kind of the surprising part here is before this scandal hit, he was 10 points behind his Democratic opponent at the governor level. And Donald Trump was, comfortably ahead this summer, and it got closer when Harris got on the ticket, where it's still a toss-up state but advantaged Donald Trump. If North Carolina is won or lost by 1 or 2 points, I think it's a very fair question to ask. Did Mark Robinson make it very close, or did Mark Robinson bring down Donald Trump just enough to let Harris leak it out? But generally speaking, the reverse coattail, that's, I guess, the technical term for this, is he going to drag her down the reverse coattail, is not a phenomenon we see quite a bit, because most people come out for the top of the ticket. In other words, if they were going to come out for Mark Robinson and now they're not excited to vote for him, they're probably going to vote for the president anyway. And if they were Mark Robinson voter, or at least on the edge about it, they're probably a Trump voter still. So I don't see it affecting it a whole lot. But in a race that could be decided by a few thousand votes, it might be just enough to tip the favor.
So I want to stay in the South. The Hill Decision Desk HQ average shows Trump up by less than 1 point in battleground Georgia, and a New York Times Siena College poll shows him leading in the state. Scott, what does Harris need to do to close the gap?
She needs to kind of catch a little bit of that Biden magic, especially in places like Georgia, North Carolina. And that Biden magic was, she's got to win 90, 92, 93% of the African-American vote. And she's got to have a slight edge. She's got to win 51 to 53% of those independent voters to eke out a win in a place like Georgia. It's certainly possible. And that's why, you know what the polling averages are, 1 point difference there. Polls are not precise enough tools. I don't know if she's a point ahead. I don't know if she's 2 points ahead or 2 points behind. All I know is it's close. I wouldn't take that 1 point as gospel in terms of where the race is at. That's why, from a probabilistic standpoint, Donald Trump, we think, has about a 58, 59% chance of winning the race. But that's essentially a coin flip. And so, Harris needs to do what Biden did and really shore up her support among the African-American vote and those independents if she's gonna take a lead, or at least improve her chances of winning in those states.
So let's go up to battleground Pennsylvania. A number of polls released over the last week have showed Harris in that state leading with a narrow lead or tied with Trump. But Scott, a number of Republicans I talked to in the state are touting their efforts to really narrow Democrats' voter registration advantage in the state. So earlier this week, we saw Republicans, for the first time in quite some time, overtook Democrats in voter registration in Luzerne County. Now, I know that's sort of been a red-leaning county, but it's still considered one of those pivot counties that Obama won and then Trump flipped. So how concerned should Democrats be?
Look, voter registration has been moving across the board, not just what you note in Pennsylvania. It's been across the board. And yes, in some places, Republicans have been out registering Democrats, like the one you mentioned, Luzerne. But here's what I would say. The biggest gainer among voter registration by party is actually independent or no party affiliation. And we see that in Pennsylvania as well. Republicans definitely got more registrations than Democrats, but who got more than both of those is the independents. And I think that's a reflection of kind of where we are in the electorate, in the sense that a lot of these people are kind of disgusted by both parties. And so as they move, or as they get an opportunity to change or update their registration, that's where we're moving to. And that all that means is that the voters are definitely up for grabs to either Democrats or Republicans. Look, at the end of the day, you never want to see registrants leave your party, Republican or Democrat. So that's not a good thing for Democrats of what you describe, but it's not necessarily all hope lost, because more of them are moving to independents than Republicans. And so they're still up for grabs.
So my colleague from the Hill, Alex Bolton, chatted with a number of Democratic senators, including Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock and Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman, who say they are worried the polls could potentially be underestimating Trump. Are these legitimate concerns from Democrats?
Absolutely. Polling error is a thing. It's not a I mean, it is a problem, but there's only one thing I'm certain of, and a good pollster will agree with this, is there will be a polling error this year. The problem is we don't know if it'll be like it was in 2016 or in 2020. We don't know what direction it's going to go. Is it going to help or hurt a Democrat or a Republican? We don't know if it'll be 2, 3, 4, 5, or even more points than that. So I think the Democratic senators' concerns are warranted. There will be a polling miss this year. The only question is how big and in what direction.
So early voting has kicked off in a number of states, and a new NBC News poll shows that half of registered voters plan to vote early this fall, with Kamala Harris leading Donald Trump 61 to 35% among those voters. Now, we know Trump has changed his tune on early and mail-in voting, and now he's calling on his supporters to vote ahead of Election Day. Scott, how effective is this messaging, considering Trump used to publicly oppose this voting method? I mean, is this still drilled into the GOP psyche?
Yeah, look, before Donald Trump was on this, Republicans used to be leaders in absentee mail return and early vote and things like that. So, I was a little skeptical when he called for his voters not to do it. But you know what? The numbers show when he pushed and said, hey, don't do this, Republican participation absentee balloting dropped. So I expect it to make a rebound this year because he's pushing it more. But I don't know that it's going to rebound to the level the Democrats are, where you might see 40, 50, 60% in some states participation. It's going to rebound some, but not a lot. I mean, sorry, not as much as we saw in say 2016 or 2012.
Well, we'll be watching for those numbers. Scott Tranter from Decision Desk HQ, thank you so much, as always, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for What's America Thinking. I'm Julia Manchester. Come back next week. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel.